Hi, and thank you for joining Edge Digital Manufacturing today for this Introduction to Digital Readiness discussion. I'm Erin Highland. I work with Edge Digital Manufacturing, and you'll be hearing from my colleague, Ravi Goodamal, and our collaborator, Halil Bedevi today, as they take you through a bit of an overview of some of the types of work that we are in. Throughout this, we'll have some interactive questions in the Q&A or in the chat where you'll see questions you can respond to. We'll be monitoring that. And then we'll also have some links you can follow with further up information. So I'm going to hand over to Ravi.
Wonderful. Thank you, Erin. And I'm just going to share my screen. So good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, and delighted to be with you today. My name's Ravi, and I am one of the founders of Edge Digital Manufacturing. We are a specialist digital transformation consultancy business. We've been working in the UK primarily for the last 7 years. And through that time, we've been working with many manufacturing leaders and a number of small and medium-sized manufacturing companies. And we have a specialist advisor network with a number of colleagues who've spent many years in industry helping manufacturing companies. And our big focus is around digital adoption and innovation. So today I'm going to be sharing with you some of our experiences, some of our learnings from the UK, and hopefully something for you to take away for your own organization. Some of the recent projects we've been involved with that I wanted to mention, we do a lot of work with the Made Smarter program in the UK, which is a large business support program to help manufacturers to innovate with data and digital technology and also to adopt some of those technologies in their business. We've also been closely involved with the UK's National Innovation Agency, Innovate UK, who've supported the development of some of our tools and are also helping us now to explore some more international connections. And one of the projects we've done that has spanned more internationally was with the Telecoms and Digital Government Regulatory Authority in the UAE, who sponsored a British Standards PAS 2009, which is particularly around digital maturity for government organizations. We work with organizations of all sizes, and if we can't help them directly, then we partner with other organizations who have the capacity to do that. So today's learning objectives, I'm going to spend a bit of time introducing digital transformation and Industry 4. And some of you, I'm sure, will be very familiar with these topics. So hopefully a chance just to reflect on where you currently are in your digital transformation. We'll talk a bit about digital readiness and the key features of PAS 1040, which is a public specification that we helped to put together. And we'll provide you with a framework that you can apply to your own business or organization. And then in the second half, we'll think a little bit about artificial intelligence, which is one of the key topics that many of our clients are really interested in exploring at the moment. I'm sure you've all been following a lot of the developments. And so we'll share some of our insights from what we're learning with our manufacturers and some case studies and findings from an accelerator program that we ran over the summer. And our overall ambition today is to help you improve confidence and knowledge of digital and AI transformation. So I'm hoping there'll be something from today's content that you can take back to your organizations. So we're all, I'm sure, familiar with the concept of industrial revolutions, and many of you will have heard buzzwords such as Industry 4, or now I'm hearing Industry 5, Industry 6. And I put this little slide together just to illustrate the development that we've seen from steam power back in the 1700s all the way now to what we would look at as cyber physical connected systems. And we're seeing that these have significant power to disrupt and transform businesses. And some of the current trends that our customers have been looking at include more automation, and that's both robotic automation but also software automation, increased use of connectivity through the Internet of Things and networks, thinking about that collaboration between humans and machines. And this is true for artificial intelligence as well, in terms of how do we get the best out of these systems and not losing sight of that, the importance of people. And all of this thinking about how our systems can become more sustainable and more resilient. But why invest in data and digital to start off with? This is a common question we're asked, really trying to understand at the heart of what is the value for an organization to start to explore these technologies. And I've put on this slide some of the leading reasons that come up from our client base. Uh, Certainly, cost savings is a big driver, trying to run businesses more efficiently. And from a sustainability perspective, reducing energy cost, reducing waste in the business, but also thinking about how technology can enable better, stronger customer relationships. And that could be by delivering a better service, so reducing lead times, improving the quality and consistency of work, but also through how we can track end to end what's happening within our manufacturing processes, which can help us to identify opportunities to increase capacity. It can improve resilience. Um, and also thinking about the people that are involved in things. So, wanting them to be engaged. And certainly as we're getting a younger workforce coming through, they are much more digitally native, and so their expectation of how organizations are run has a much higher degree of expectation around digital technology and use of data. So to make manufacturing an exciting sector for this new generation, we need to be embracing some of these emerging technologies. An area we've been closely involved with for the last few years is around supply chain. And I'll talk a little bit in a moment about some of that. But that's another key benefit from technologies to help to improve visibility, to be able to respond more flexibly and with agility to customer requests. And we're seeing, increasingly a demand to bring manufacturing closer to home. So whether that's nearshoring or reshoring. And again, technology is really important to be able to do that in a cost-efficient way. I mentioned supply chains, and what I've put on this slide is some of the research that our partners at the Digital Supply Chain Hub produced this summer. And these are this is very UK centric, I must admit, but some of the supply chain challenges facing manufacturers at the moment. And I think wherever you are in the world, there will be similar challenges, particularly around political climate, international trading conditions. Um, and other challenges around currency and interest rates. And you can see here, just thinking about COVID-19 and some of the losses that UK manufacturers incurred, significant amounts. Um, and so companies are asking, well, how can we protect ourselves and build resilience for the future? Because what we're seeing is some of this disruption. It's not a once in a generation thing. It is now a much more frequent part of doing business, being able to handle disruption. And this is where there's a key role for data and digital technology to help. There are many different types of technology, and I think sometimes we'll use phrases like data and digital technology and be thinking about lots of different things. Uh, on this slide, what I show on the left is some of the enabling technologies. So these are things that we might be more used to seeing in a business. Uh, whether it's as simple as an IT system, using the cloud, having order management systems. Perhaps if you're designing products, you might be using a system to use drawings. Many of these technologies have been around for a number of years, and they're a key part of doing business. On the right-hand side, what we've got is what we would call industrial digital technologies. So these are some of the emerging technologies that can really unlock that power of cyber physical systems and the connectivity that we're seeing through the internet now. And these technologies also sort of align with some research that was done by the UK government for the Made Smarter program. And I've put the link here, and there's a really interesting report. It's 7 years old now, but many of the findings are still very true, and I think are applicable across many markets. And in the middle, these are some of the more frontier, emerging, deep technologies that increasingly we're looking at future opportunities. And often this is bringing together multiple technologies and thinking about their power uh, when you put them together. So, for example, you might have an ERP system where you're capturing your order data and your financial data, but when you combine that with the power of artificial intelligence, now you have a much richer tool that can interrogate that data and use the power of large language models to start, giving you findings that you can action, uh, but in plain English or Turkish, so plain language that you can read. So Lots of power from how these technologies combine together. But a question we do get asked by many companies is, where do I start? And this isn't just if you've never invested in technology, this is also along the journey, because we do see digitization as an ongoing journey. And every step along the way, we're always asking the question, how do we make sure that what we're doing is going to add value to our organization? Are we choosing the right technologies? And increasingly, we're seeing many more options for companies, which means a lot more chance of confusion and being overwhelmed by the choices. But also trying to build that right trusted partnerships, and knowing that the vendors and the consultants and the people who are helping to implement technology can really help you avoid the mistakes and make the right decisions. But ultimately, it's thinking about, will this add value to the organization? And will this help my customers? Will it help us to do a better job? Will it make the boat go faster? So to answer this question, this is where we have been involved in developing uh, this concept of digital readiness. And we were part of the team that wrote this British Standards PAS 1040, which was looking at how to adopt digital technologies in manufacturing, and really trying to provide a simple, easy to follow framework for manufacturers of all sizes. What do we mean by digital readiness? So we define digital readiness as the maturity of a business or part of it to optimize the use of digital technologies to achieve its objectives. And I think a key point to raise here is, not everyone needs to be a smart factory. Not everyone is going to find that investing millions of pounds in lots of different technologies is the right answer. So it's about understanding what objectives you have for your organization and thinking about what that next step is to help your organization perform better and to achieve your objectives. And so sometimes it's as simple as identifying one small solution that's going to make a difference and doing that really well. The PAS outlines 10 characteristics of digital readiness, and these are taking a holistic look through the business. So starting with leadership. So uh, does the digital plan, do your ideas, do they have sponsorship from management? Is there a clear plan? Is that being communicated with the team? Thinking about the culture within the team. So how are we as an organization empowering our people to contribute and to engage? And then thinking about technology integration. And this is both thinking about the legacy technology in your business, but also the new technologies that you're exploring. Thinking about processes. So this is within your core operations. How are we using data? How are we managing our day-to-day operational processes? But technology won't be enough on itself without having the people and the systems to support it. And particularly when we're thinking about integrating legacy systems and managing multiple systems, there's a lot of thought needed around how to support that across the organization. We then look outside the business. So often the benefits from digital come from how we work with our customers, with our suppliers, and with our partners. We need to work with our people as well. So we're thinking about recruiting the right people, retaining them, training them, sort of developing those digital skills within the organization, but also giving people data so they can manage their own performance and understand where they can find those performance improvements. And that's, it's about how we're capturing data, and then how we're measuring and monitoring that data and using it to drive decision making. And that's both within the factory and then also thinking about with our external partners. So how are we managing suppliers? How are we communicating and sharing data with our customers? And then how are we managing the ongoing after sales, and increasingly when we're thinking about circularity, it's sort of tracking those assets and what we produce for a much longer period of time. We've narrowed this down into five key components: leadership, people, operations, partners, and technology. Um, and it's this holistic bringing these things together that really matters. But why does it matter? So from a leadership perspective, I think what we have found working with companies, that to successfully adopt new technology or to innovate, it needs a clear plan from the top. Without that, there's limited direction, and it's very hard for these projects because they are complex projects to succeed. Bringing the people on that journey involves change management. I've mentioned skills and training. Um, Operations, I've talked about the data we want to capture. Uh, but unless we can use that data and understand how it can impact and change processes, it I see a lot of organizations capture lots and lots of data, put sensors and build databases, but it's about how are we then using and interrogating that data to inform our decisions. We talked earlier about the infrastructure and support. And then briefly, just thinking about the supply chain, uh, we need to think about how our data is flowing end to end. So how is data flowing from the raw materials and the suppliers we're working with all the way through to how we're then sharing that with customers so they can get the most from what we're making for them. So I'm going to pause at that point, and we're going to have a poll in the chat, which is really to ask you, where are you on your digital journey? And it'd be great to just get a sense for those of you on the call, and we'll give you a minute or so just to fill that in.
So you can type Explorer, Pathfinder, or Trailblazer in the chat, and we'll just see what the trend is.
So I'll keep going while we get more feedback in the chat. Um, One of the ways to assess where we're at is using digital readiness tools. And we've been involved in creating a simple online platform which allows companies to measure by asking a series of basic questions to get a sense of what your current readiness is. And I thought I'd share some of the results from the UK. So we have worked, about 1,000 companies have used our tools. And we ask questions generally on a 0 to 5 scale. So using a Likert scale. And you can see that across the different themes, uh, we've experienced a relative strength from a leadership, technology, uh, and even in terms of people within the business. But where a lot of organizations have found it more difficult is around the real-time data they're capturing and then how they're using their data and working outside the factory. The overall distribution of scores, as you might expect from a large data set, has got quite a normal distribution. Um, and in a way, one of the things we think this reflects is a bit of a yes, no. On average, you're either embracing digital or you're not. Um, so, there's not a huge surprise in that spread. But I think it's within the individual questions and the individual areas where we get the most insights. Um, what we're seeing is there's a lot of unknown unknowns. So for many companies, starting your digital journey, you don't know what you don't know. But as you start to explore the new technologies and learn, then you start to identify new areas and uncover aspects to work on that maybe at the start you hadn't thought about. We're also seeing a strong correlation between different responses, which sort of shows just getting on that journey and doing something small can start to make a big difference. And the aspect that has the strongest overall correlation is leadership. And that's why I said, having that strong top-down passion and vision to get started with the technology is a really important aspect of making progress. The other point, which I've put in bold here, is the companies with the strongest digital readiness also seem to be the companies who were the strongest with working outside the factory. So that supply chain digitization and really thinking about how to connect with customers and suppliers in terms of use of data and digital is really important. So how to improve? And we will share these slides later, but just some examples which are adapted from the British Standard. So within each aspect of digital readiness, there are basic steps that can be taken that can really help your organization to improve its confidence and to start to see the benefits of digital readiness. And some of these, as you can see from this slide, are things that as an individual you can take the lead on. So, for example, studying use cases and demonstrators is a good example of an activity that anyone could take. Connecting with peers, finding out what other organizations are doing. Um, so those are things that anyone can do. But then there are other things which, as we say, really require that top-down sponsorship. Uh, so, for example, uh, defining the roles and creating a budget is really important. Um, Being able to evaluate the business case and set aside funding, or even thinking about your recruitment and training policies. So, when you prioritize digital, that requires, I think, the leadership to be saying, we want to be looking for these skills in the people that we're inviting into our business. And making data available and being more transparent with the data that's being shared across the teams so that they can use that to improve and to perform better. Um, I've noticed there are hands up. What I'm going to suggest is we will have time for Q&A in a short while. So do put your question in the chat. The other thing I wanted to mention is we are doing this in English, but we do have a colleague of mine, Halil, who speaks Turkish. He'll introduce himself a bit later this morning, and so we can accommodate questions in both languages. Um, so lots of things that can be done to improve. Um, every one of these things is a small step. And I think part of undertaking digital readiness assessments and working with the team to put a plan in place is to identify individual steps that can make a difference. Um, to start that journey, we one of the tools that we use is this reflective exercise. So each of these questions are questions that you could spend part of your management meeting, or if you're focused on continuous improvement and you have a weekly meeting with your team to think about how you can do things better, any one of these questions would be a good starting place. And you can see we've grouped them by each of the digital readiness themes and given some examples. So if I take, for example, on the operational side, and we're talking about how can we make the experience better for our customers. So that might lead to a conversation, a very simple conversation to identify where we want to improve our processes, but then thinking about what are some of those barriers. And that's where, when we then think about the different digital technologies, there may be a digital solution that can make a difference. I wanted to share a few things that we've done over the last year working with a number of small and medium-sized manufacturers. So we ran a Digital Readiness Accelerator, and the process is very simple. We take people through an assessment of their digital readiness. We help them to put a plan together. We think about the metrics and the KPIs that they want to improve. And then it's about thinking about within the factory, working with the team and engaging them and involving them in the process, but then also outside thinking about how to engage with others who are also on their journey. And that's been one of the most valuable aspects, I think, of any program like this is that ability to learn from others and share best practice. Some of the themes that came out of that, I think, are quite interesting. So, firstly, a real desire to balance new technologies with human-centric approaches. So recognizing that data and digital technologies are not the only answer, and it's not going to replace the role of humans. And it's really important to work out how we can get that balance right. Leadership and change management. So many people exploring new technologies, but the role of leadership to drive adoption, but then also thinking about ways to engage team members and to work on that wider cultural aspect of introducing new technologies. Skills and training, super important. Um, and thinking about hands-on support as well as, you can get introduce a new system and teach people how to use the system. But I think there's wider training that's needed across industry just to help people who maybe haven't been using technologies on a day-to-day basis to start learning how to get the most. I was speaking with a company this week who are investing in Microsoft training for their team. And particularly those of us with more office-based jobs might take it for granted how to use desktop software. But from a production perspective, that's not necessarily a day-to-day activity. So investing in that training can then help when you're introducing more digitized systems to be able to get the most from them. The role of data management and integration, really vital. But that introduces challenges around the quality of data and how you're going to manage governance and data security. So, as we talked with companies in a peer setting, sharing ideas and best practice for managing that security. We talked about culture, and I think one of the best ways to encourage innovation is through experimentation and creating an environment within your organization so you can take small risks, small steps, and pilot new ideas first. And as you build confidence and as the team sees the value to the business, then you can make bigger investments. Making sure that new technologies are customer centric. So really being clear, we talk a lot about AI, but which applications of AI are going to improve your customer's experience? Because if there isn't a tangible benefit, then we may not necessarily see the value in terms of strengthening those relationships and getting more sales. And finally, and this is something that we've seen over a number of years, there is still a lot of cultural resistance to digital change. So there's a need to think about how to overcome skepticism within the business and really being able to communicate effectively and share the benefits so that people can see how it's going to make their lives easier and therefore want to embrace it. From that list, you can see the ones I've highlighted here. There's a commonality in all of these focus on people. So I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes just sharing some insights from thinking we've done around what that could look like. So you may have seen empathy models like this, where you think about, what are people seeing? What are they saying? What are they hearing? What are they feeling? And how does that influence what are they thinking? And then what are they doing? And we see, a need to take people on a journey. So at the start, we might just be consulting with them, and there's a sense that perhaps they don't feel confident in using these new technologies. But taking them on that journey from being consulted to collaborating and starting to believe that there is value through to being committed, and then ultimately into a sort of virtuous cycle where they're continuously improving. And there is a strong correlation between this journey and people's own sense of their digital readiness in terms of their knowledge and confidence with using digital technologies. And we can measure this too, and this is where we've used digital readiness as a way to track how people are changing on this journey. So sometimes we'll work with an organization and we won't just look at their organizational digital readiness, but we'll also look at where individual staff members are at the start. And then over time, as they're getting the support, as they're collaborating with colleagues, as they're starting to see the value from the new technologies, we can measure and track both in terms of their digital readiness, but also in terms of the impact on key KPIs within the business. And that's just a way of starting to measure improvement in culture over time. The other aspect that came out of our findings was around data and AI. So in the ones I've highlighted here, all of these within our conversations centered in some way around businesses adopting and using AI within their business. And so I wanted to share just a few examples of this from our cohort. And this is not meant to be a definitive list, but it's representative based on some companies we worked with. So, I've started with this question, disrupt or be disrupted, and really we're seeing the role of data and the role of AI. That there is a risk here that if we're not embracing the latest technologies, then will another organization work more efficiently and use these technologies? So a lot of the companies we were speaking to, we might talk about it as fear of missing out, but I think it's also a genuine defensive play to make sure that they can continue to deliver the best service to their customers. So in aerospace, working with a company that has been using an AI agent that's been linked with their supplier management software. And what that is doing is saving time and money. So it's allowing them to get answers to questions from their data much quicker. and it's reliable and accurate because it's a closed system looking at only their data. Another organization, slightly larger one, they want to get the benefits from AI and machine learning, but what they realize is they need to clean their data and they need to really work on being able to trust that data in order to then apply more advanced data analytics. In the cosmetic sector, working with an organization that has thousands of products on their database and customers who they distribute, so they're often working with these customers to give them product information. And they've been experimenting with a generative AI tool that can allow searching for some of that product information more on a self-service basis and much faster. Uh, with them, which is interesting, is they've started with a small pilot that's cost, I would say, less than $10,000 as a way of just getting the ball rolling. And then as you build confidence, you can then invest more to improve and refine the findings from the tool. And then the final example I wanted to show from our cohort was around automating quoting. So for this organization, what they found was they were getting requests for many quotes, and those were taking up a lot of staff time within the sales and operations team. Uh, and there are tools out there now that allow automated loading in the drawing, understanding and deciphering the parameters, and then working with an increasing parts library to provide accurate quotes. With I think something like 95% accuracy. So that's an example of a tool that can save a lot of time and a lot of money. Um, some of the data projects, so I mentioned the data cleansing, but other ones have been around using existing sales data. So where you've got, for example, an ERP system and you've been capturing 2 to 3 to 4 years of sales data, being able to apply algorithms to that to get new findings. And I think one of the interesting outputs from that exercise with one of the companies was realizing that previously held perspectives on who the best customers were was not reflected in the actual data. And so through very, I'd say fairly basic data analysis, so it didn't require months and months of analysis. This was, with a few spreadsheets and applying some data science, able to discover that actually there was lots of value to be found from different parts of the client portfolio. And that could then influence what the sales team were doing and ultimately leading to increased revenue and more profitable clients. Machine data is another aspect where, increasingly companies are looking at sensors so that you can capture what's happening on those machines, measuring uptime and downtime more frequently, but using that to identify where there might be energy savings or to change certain processes or shifts based on what the data is saying. And I think I mentioned the cosmetics company earlier. So all of these are practical examples of how companies that we're working with are starting to experiment with AI. I will share these later. There's some work we did just to draw out a few AI use cases. Uh, and I think one thing I would mention here is that we hear a lot of hype in the media about artificial intelligence, but a lot of it is focused on the large language models and generative AI, whereas artificial intelligence as a discipline has been around for many years, and there's lots of different types of ways that is being used to help industry. And on this page we've got a few examples of for example, using computer vision to support quality control, or using data analytics to review existing employee data. And that's just an example of uh, traditional AI, which was around way before some of the current tools that are in popular parlance. But I think generative AI is also a an exciting area, and we're seeing a lot of interest. And there's lots of different use cases from, if you like, more content generation and helping to support and speed up code writing, through to some more experimental things. For example, one of our customers has been using AI or generative AI to support with working internationally. So where there's a language barrier, using some of these tools that can automatically translate through the chatbot, and that's actually reducing their need to recruit as many people in new territories or to be able to start working in a territory before they've got a local language specialist. Um, so lots of different use cases, and I think the other thing I find interesting is the entry cost is now quite low. So in terms of getting started with a pilot, um, it's a lot easier than it may have been 3 or 4 years ago.
Ravi, could you
So
just clarify indicative cost, what that means?
on the previous slide,
Yes.
so the this is sort of saying how much would it cost to start a small project in any of these areas within your organization. So, and when we say small, so a small project that can start to see some tangible benefit for your organization. So, for example, I mean, a basic one would be around marketing content, and I'm sure many of you. In fact, I think there was a poll question we were going to put in, which we might throw in just around getting a sense of how much people are using some of these technologies at the moment, and it would be interesting, maybe in the Q&A to pick up on that. But right now there are either you can use your own tool by taking out a subscription to one of the main language models, or there are sort of pre-built off-the-shelf solutions that many of the CRM providers and sales tool providers offer. And so for a few £100s a month, you can get 1 or 2 licenses so that your marketing team can start using automated tools that, for example, can help you speed up coming up with new blog content, or if you're tracking leads through your CRM system, and you want to take advantage of some of the AI analytics, and if you've got enough data, then a number of these software providers uh, have enabled sort of AI features. But often, there is that additional cost to fully benefit from those premium features. So for indicative costs at the starting end, it would be very much experimenting with off-the-shelf solutions or low-code solutions. And then at the higher end, that might be where you want to build a private model. So you might be running uh, a, a system that's not necessarily um, controlled by someone else. And often, the cost is also the time it takes to put a few team members to focus on trying to develop the project, because it is a commitment. Uh, The next slide just shares some of the findings from a discussion we did with the companies on the accelerator, where we were thinking about AI and thinking about these opportunities, and really trying to understand some of their concerns, and you may resonate with some of these observations. So there was a sense, clearly that there are cost savings and efficiencies from AI, and benefits from using these more intuitive interfaces, for example, the chatbots. Um, However, a concern that sometimes we get excited by all these new widgets when it may not necessarily be addressing a business priority that we're immediately facing. Um, and so I think the conclusion for many was to see, where they could experiment based on what you already have. So before committing to investing in new technologies, thinking, well, okay, I already use Microsoft or Google, or a big vendor, and they've released some AI features. Why don't I take the time to understand them and to train my team up to get the most out of them? Um, but needing to work with the team to overcome some of the resistance. And I think with AI, particularly around data security, and so it being really important to understand what our clients think. And so, for example, if we're working in data sensitive sectors, we need to be much more careful. And I think on this, one of the concerns I see is that, companies can maybe not be putting in place the proper security around how their staff members are using AI. So, whilst we may not be implementing an AI project, if people have access to open source tools, we need to be really vigilant to how they might be using those tools and making sure that they understand the risks. so that they're not sharing sensitive data or personal data or other things that could cause a reputational or commercial issue for the organization. So I've seen some companies go as far as sort of putting firewalls in place and blocking access to certain tools until they've assessed and ensured appropriate security. And this is becoming increasingly a concern as we see some of these more sort of agent AI systems where I saw an example last week where an individual was scammed out of money from their account because the AI had access to personal password data. And so, one needs to be very careful. I think the other observation was when using large language models, there's a real sensitivity to the structuring of the questions. So we've now got a lot more training in prompt engineering, but I think that sense of trial and error and needing to have a culture where one can work through different options uh, to get the best results. And this sort of links to the importance of upskilling, of really supporting and sort of underpinning any project from the top, but also prioritizing not just the automation from the tool, but also the human input, because it is that human ingenuity that can help get the most out of these systems. I talked in one of the examples of how we can use customer data and data analytics and using AI to really understand who are the right customers. And when we had a discussion with our companies looking at this, there's some really interesting insights on how to implement a project like that. And I think um, this is in a way relevant to many AI projects. So the first thing is really defining the question that you're looking to answer. And it may not be the first question. So there's a sense of really taking the time to understand what it is you want, whether it's AI or digital technology, what do you want it to do? Um, Involving customers and suppliers, and we looked at this with the partners component of digital readiness. That's really important to get more value from the project. And using a blend of skills. So I think for those of us in the manufacturing sector, it's finding that mix between process engineering, data science, and it does take these different disciplines and a holistic project to get the best value. We've talked about leadership and getting stakeholders to support it. Um, Another observation I'll just focus on is it's one thing to find ideas and patterns, but it's another thing to change behavior. So it does come back to, what is our approach around involving the team and developing that culture of innovation. And I think within that, communication and using plain language to share the results. Um, and as you say, having confidence to make those difficult decisions where the data maybe is showing results that are surprising. I won't dwell too much on this slide, but one of the applications is around supply chain, and we've spent a lot of work over the last year or two working with companies to identify how to implement technologies specifically to improve how their supply chain is working. And that's in part been a response to some of the challenges we've seen since COVID and that increasing volatility I talked about earlier. Uh, and just before we move to Q&A, I wanted to just share a few examples, and I'm not recommending any tools here. So I've chosen these because they happen to be organizations that we've worked with in the past, or they've helped one of our clients. But I'll just mention a couple of them just to give you a flavor for the sorts of things that are out there. So Kavita have been working with us with the Digital Supply Chain Hub, and they've developed a supplier tool that integrates with an AI agent. And really clever because it allows you to interrogate your supplier data that you already have, but also manage email communications and changes, all using the AI to make that a seamless conversation. Another example is Looper, who've been looking particularly at the problem of life cycle assessments and how can AI help to reduce the cost of those, to allow you to interrogate and run scenarios with much more data. And then a final one I'll mention, Singular Intelligence. So they've been using AI to help with forecasting and running projects where they're using that end-to-end data for example, in the food sector from farm all the way through production through to the retail setting, and using AI to um, analyze all of that data and to identify efficiencies, ultimately to reduce waste and to save costs and reduce overproduction. And there's many more examples. And I think what's really exciting in this field is the number of new startups and organizations who are addressing specific business challenges, but using AI to try to find that angle. But I've talked for quite a while. There's a couple more pages that we'll share with you. There's some links to some UK-based AI initiatives that might be helpful. And then from our side, we'll follow up with how we can work with you going forwards. But I think if I stop sharing my screen, we can open it up to some questions. And before we take our first question, I'd love to invite my colleague Halil just to briefly introduce himself as well.
Thank you very much, Ravi. And tüm katılımcılara Londra'dan merhabalar. Umarım bugünkü sunumdan keyif aldınız ve faydalı buldunuz. Ben Halil Bedevi, bir üretim ve uluslararası ticaret uzmanıyım ve Manufacturing IQ adı altında yetkili yüksek mühendis ve de danışman olarak çalışıyorum. Ravi ve Edge Digital Manufacturing ile birlikte de çalışıyorum. Köken olarak Kıbrıslı Türk'üm, ancak uzun yıllardır Birleşik Krallık'ta üretim ve bankacılık sektörlerinde mühendis, fabrika müdürü ve danışman olarak görevlerde bulundum. Birçoğunuzun bildiği üzere Birleşik Krallık ve Türkiye arasında bilim, inovasyon ve üretim ve ortaklıklar konularında çeşitli ticaret ve işbirliği görüşmeleri hız kazanıyor ve bu faaliyetlerin önümüzdeki aylarda ve yıllarda daha da artmasını bekliyorum. Bu durum her iki ülke için de yeni iş fırsatları yaratacaktır. Umarım bazılarınız bu potansiyel fırsatlardan en iyi şekilde yararlanır. Bu konuda size yardımcı olmaktan mutluluk duyarız. Aşağıda bahsedeceğim konularla ilgili bir şeyler konuşmak isterseniz lütfen benimle iletişime geçmekten çekinmeyin. Örneğin Birleşik Krallık ile ticaret, Birleşik Krallık'ta üretim, danışmanlık, temsilcilik, iş ve kişi bağlantıları ve işbirliği. Son olarak 12 Şubat'ta Yuvarlak Masa etkinliğimizde bazılarınızla tekrar görüşmeyi dört gözle bekliyorum. Teşekkür ederim. Söz Ravi'de. Over to you, Ravi.
Excellent. Well, so we've got about 10 to 15 minutes, and between Halil and myself and Aaron, we'd love to pick up any questions that you may have based on any of the content that I've shared, but also on related topics. So please use the chat if there are any questions. And while we wait for questions, I would love to get him more. We've had a few people talking about what you're currently doing with AI and pilot projects, and it would be wonderful to give him more feedback from what's been working as well. So we'll give it a few minutes while we wait. But please don't be shy. That we would love to answer questions. But in terms of what we're looking to do next, we are running a roundtable on the 12th of February, and that'll be a smaller session, probably with 10 to 15 individuals. We've been really excited by some of the projects that we've been able to unlock through working collaboratively. And often this is businesses working together with research organizations and sometimes with public sector support as well. Often it can be quite early stage, so there might be a specific challenge or a particular area within manufacturing that we're looking to improve. And we would love to develop some new collaborations between the UK and Turkey, together with some of our partners. And so I think if that's something that might be of interest to you, then we would love to speak further. There's been a question coming in from Janice asking about. So I think this was the assessment talking about people being less challenging in their operations. So I should probably clarify this, and there's 2 points that I could share. So the first is in terms of our digital readiness assessments, because it's a self-assessment, what this means is that people, when they're answering the questions, are judging that their if you like, focus on recruitment and upskilling and training in the organization, they're feeling quite confident about that compared to when we're asking them about how are you capturing real-time data, how are you using that data to drive decision making. And so I think I wouldn't say that it's less challenging, but probably coming into the process, many organizations feel more confident that they've got their skills area under control. Now, I would challenge that, and this is always why you can't judge things just based on self-assessment, because I think you're right. Actually, in many respects, implementing a sensor or capturing some data is far more straightforward than getting people to the right skill level and to be using those technologies effectively. But I think it does reflect probably I mentioned unknown unknowns, and sometimes at the start you feel more confident in specific areas. And yeah, absolutely agree with what you've said in the chat. It's and one of the reasons we have this assessment and we enjoy using it with organizations is it's used to start a conversation and to get people internally thinking about what are their priorities. And we often find that that conversation is the start of a much longer interactive journey. And even if I think about people issues and upskilling, there's so many different areas to focus on within that that you might score yourself highly, but then as someone probes you and challenges you, you might realize that okay, yeah, we're encouraging people to do continuous improvement, but it's only in a non-digital area or it's in one specific technology. But no, great question, and I think important to clarify the self-assessment aspect of it. We do have about 5 more minutes if there are any other questions. And one question I'd love to sort of put in the chat would be, what are people's appetite or interest in international collaboration? Because I know that comes with its own complexities, and yeah, it'd be just really interesting to get some feedback on what organizations think around and working cross-border. Halil, you looked like you were going to say something.
And Ravi, if I may just add as well, it would be interesting also to hear from people about what is the biggest challenge hurdle for them to start adopting AI, smart technologies and solutions. So what's the biggest thing that will help them along their journey? That will be interesting to hear from people. What's most worrying them about all this, really? For their businesses, and every business will be different, obviously. It would be good to hear from people. Please don't be shy, start typing or yeah, that's good.
It was interesting to see earlier just the responses around where people are at in their digital journey, and I think that very much resonates with our experience in the UK. So in fact, I don't think anyone was bold enough to say they were a trailblazer, but many people sort of resonating with the digital explorer, and that I think is reflective of two things. I think it's reflective of manufacturing sector at a global level, but also the pace of change of technology. So even if you might think that you're doing great, within 2 years there's a whole new technology to explore, and so
Yeah.
even maintaining that digital readiness, it requires investment.
Yeah, I think we've got a response. It says asset complexities, what people find most kind of challenging, difficult. So, like with any new technology, really, I mean, we've been through this when computers were first introduced, when CNC machines were first introduced. It's just people kind of thinking, right, what's round the corner? Uh, which one should I kind of invest in, and what happens when things change? Those are always common challenges because some of the technologies cost money and it's not easy. So they're natural concerns to people looking to spend their money buying either software or hardware, really. So but everything will fall into place, I guess, as we go along. But this is really not a choice to many companies anymore. I think if you just wait and not do anything, the business is likely to suffer. So for competitiveness and profitability, it is becoming necessary for most types of businesses to embrace AI and smart technologies in manufacturing. So that's probably one thing I would emphasize. Don't just not do anything. That wouldn't be right.
Yeah, and I think just on the return on investment calculation, some of the work we did in our accelerator, and we'll share the report next month, was looking at how digital readiness aligns with business performance, and almost could you quantify the benefit of some of these digital readiness investments as a way of building that business case. That's been more challenging to prove, but some of the work that we've seen done through the Digital Supply Chain Hub in the UK. They've worked with the university to start to quantify the impact of technologies that have been invested. And in some cases, we're seeing sort of 20 to 30% savings. And some technologies lend themselves better to that calculation because you can look at the operational time or very specific cost factors that were involved before the technology, and you can then quantify and show the impact. There's a question about smart technologies in the automotive sector, and Halil, you've probably been there as well. But we've got one of our smart manufacturing winners in the UK, BMW, have got a really cool digitized factory in Oxford, and because they've won some of the awards, I've had the privilege, and I think Halil, you might have as well, of walking through and seeing how
Yeah.
they put some of those technologies into practice. And really, I say not simple, but really clever examples. For example, using collaborative robots, and there you might be looking at a process that can be repeated time and time again. And so actually the robot might have a big upfront capex expenditure, but you can see that business case for when it'll start to save money.
Yeah.
Another example, sorry, to Halil.
Sorry, Ravi. I'll let you finish. Sorry, I can
I
come
was
on.
going to say another example I saw was around robotic welding, and for that, because someone had implemented it just before the pandemic, they were then able to keep the production going whilst people weren't able to get on site. And so, there are examples of where these technologies can save money, but also address disruption.
Yeah.
Halil.
I was just going to add that there's one question which says, what do you think about smart technologies in automotive sector? Does it provide cost reduction or not? I think cost reduction is one aspect of digitalization or automation. It is obviously a factor, but there are a lot of other benefits of automating things and digitalization, things like quality, consistency, ease of introduction, making changes, and things like that. So it's worth bearing those things in mind. And when everybody gets to a similar level, like in automotive, it's not really about cost reduction so much because everybody is at the same level. It's about just, it depends what you compare it with. If you compare things with, doing everything manually, it would produce cost savings, but it just becomes more than cost savings. It just becomes the norm, and it allows companies to produce more consistent things. In some cases, take away the human variability, training elements, people being sick or absent, things like that, how to cope with those. Of course, when you digitalize, there are other issues. You need different types of skills and people to be able to, for example, program the robots and look after the equipment, doing updates and things like that. But when, it's the way things are done in a sector, I don't think there's a lot of choice. You'll find in automotive, automotive is one of the sectors who uses most robots, for example. So it's become, they're very, very similar. So thank you.
Thank you, Halil. And there's a question / comment, just thinking about legacy technology, and I've seen examples of applying sensors and other data capture tools onto legacy technology. But absolutely, I think your point about cybersecurity is really well made. And actually, one of the challenges, slightly tangential, but legacy software. So really valuable manufacturing data held in software that's no longer supported. And particularly if you're in sectors where you need to manage your cybersecurity, almost having to take some of those machines offline, so that don't have a vulnerability there. So these are not simple solutions. So it does require a little bit of specification and thinking through different options. But there are some really sort of homespun solutions I've seen where people are using a Raspberry Pi and some basic data capture software on a legacy machine in order to capture some data. But I think you're right. The more newer digitally enabled assets, it's far easier to work with them, and particularly from an interoperability perspective. We've come to the end of the hour, so I will stay online if there are any other questions, but I'd just like to thank everyone for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure. I'll, if I can, let me just share my screen again with our contact details. And if you do have any questions, please email us. And I think there's also a link in the chat to a follow-on survey if you'd like to stay in touch and to find out more about our roundtable, and also in terms of the certificate of attendance for those of you who would like that. But if there's no other questions, then we will sort of close the formal bit of this webinar now. Thank you.